MaDonna from Mad Beast Quilt and Sew, and thank you for joining me on Make It Mondays on Wednesday. Just kind of a crazy week. We had a big event here at the store, but I'm so excited that you're here. And hopefully you can join us, or you can watch us at a later time, either through Facebook or on our YouTube. So it's really fun to be able to see everybody and to get some projects done. So we are working on the Vintage December, which is this. And I've showed it a couple times. I've changed up my colors a little bit, and I hope you did too, because I really am going to be looking forward to seeing all of these when we're done. So today what we're going to work on is actually half square triangles. And the first set of those that we're going to do today are large. So we're going to be using our 5-inch squares of both our background color and our front facing color. So that my half square triangles are going to be green, black, and white, and they're going to be black and white. So I've got 2 different sets of those, so a total of 8 fabrics I'm going to be sewing with contrasting 8 white. So we're going to work on the sewing portion today. Last week we drew the lines and we figured out how to do that. So today I want to talk about sewing. One of the things that I find is the hardest thing is when people are starting off is that they get their threads all gobbled up and that they feel like it's kind of a mess, or they feel like they get a little clump of threads underneath. So there's 2 ways to avoid that. One is to make sure that you're not using your thread cutter. Your thread cutter leaves the bobbin thread down underneath, and when it starts then, it has nothing to join onto, so it kind of just knots itself. And even with the knotting function, it just makes a goober underneath there. Sometimes that goober works out just fine and it just progresses along. Other times it has a tendency to pull your fabric down and into your machine. So ways to avoid that is 1, hold on to your threads as you start. So by that I mean that when you cut them, leave them long enough that you can put your finger on them or hold them in some way when you start again. If you pull those threads off to the left side of your needle as you're getting started, the presser foot also helps to hold those threads in place so they don't get sucked back and in. Easy trick to do. The second way is what we call a cheater or a starter, and it's a scrap of fabric that we put underneath the needle and we're just going to sew across. And once we've sewn across it, again, I grab those threads right away. It's just my habit, okay? I get started on this, and when I'm ready to sew my next set, I stitch off that piece of fabric by about 4 stitches, 4 to 6, and then I set my next set of fabrics that I'm going to sew right underneath the needle. So I have got my green square, and I've got one of my white squares that I drew my line on, so you can see that. I've got my line going from corner to corner. I'm going to put that on top of my green fabric. What I'm going to do then is I am going to sew right next to that line at 1/4 inch. The problem with that is if we are not squaring up, now I'm saying that, if we're not squaring up, we need to make sure that we're at a scant 1/4 inch. So what does that mean? That means that when I'm sewing this, I don't want to see the line actually. I want to be closer to the line. So a way to help with that is lining up your body differently. So when you sit down to sew, most of us put our nose to the needle and have it straight up and down. I actually scooch my body just to the right a little bit so I can see the side edge of my foot. So that way I'm actually looking at the side of my foot, not at my needle. When the pencil line that I've drawn is going through the needle then, I am covering up, and I'm just barely, it's just riding right on the edge there, covering with the foot. So I'm going to stitch and then I'm going to show you. So I'm going to put this underneath here. I have already sewn about 4 stitches. Line this up nicely. Set my fabric up and underneath, and I'm going to stitch, and then I'm going to show you exactly what I've got here. So I stitch, stitch, stitch. And look I just stitched all the way off. I can grab my fabric here now, cut it, set it right back and underneath here, and I'm ready to go the next time. Many people travel with this little scrap underneath their needle all the time. If I'm chain piecing and doing a lot of pieces, I don't need this right away. I might not need it for 20 blocks, but I've got it ready to go. I'm going to cut my last thread, and I'm going to cut it in between. So when I cut it in between, it still pops open, but it left enough of a twist right on the edge there. Let's see if we can do it that way. There we go. It leaves enough of a twist there. But now what I want you to see is the other side. I am closer to that line than by 1/4 of an inch. If I actually measured it, I am just shy of 1/4 of an inch. Or if I set my ruler on it, I can see it right next to the 1/4 inch mark. So it's not hiding under the 1/4 of an inch. I can see it right next to it. So I prefer to sew always on the right hand side of my needle. It's just my preference. You may find that you sew on the left hand side of your needle. Whichever direction that you sew the most of, scoot your chair to that direction. So I sew on the right hand, I sit to the right of the needle. If you sew on the left, scooch to the left. There's other times where you want to be straight on, but for piecing, that's the easiest way for me to be able to see that. Once I've pieced several of these blocks, I'm no longer going to chain piece. Okay, and we have to stitch on both sides, so I almost forgot to tell you that. Okay, so we're going to stitch on the one side, and I'm going to stitch probably all 8 of them, and then I'm going to take the whole stack of them, flip it over, and sew on the other side. So what I'm going to wind up with is a seam that looks like that, and let me show you the back side so you can see my 2 lines. No pencil mark down the middle. I'm then going to cut on that pencil mark, and I'll meet you here next week. So for this week's homework, we are going to be stitching all of these together. 2 seams on either side, 1 straight line right down the middle. Hopefully you've learned another tip or 2, and we will see you next week ready for the next step. Bye guys, have a great week.